Hi there. The new recording features of YouTube are not working very well, so the video stalls and I can't see what I'm saying. And the clock has started to ring because it's 11 o'clock at night here in Holland. I got a question about gold and silver, and I think that it's important to understand the real, let's say, the natural environment of gold and silver, and that's a that's a society that doesn't have any fossil fuels, that has high labor intensity. Why is that important? Well, because then the liquidity in gold and silver can be constant if the population is constant. And the productivity of the population will also be constant because it's limited by the physical capabilities of it and by agricultural technology. And once, let's say, one of the two gets out of balance, so if somebody starts mining a lot of gold and brings it into circulation and starts hoarding, let's say, labor, again you get a distortion, you get inflation. People will start asking more gold for their labor. And once you get the technological advance in the agricultural sector, so you get more food out of the ground with less labor, then of course that will also mean that, but that will level out pretty quickly because as a result you'll get population increase. And you know, I think that without fossil fuels we won't have a population increase as we have seen, because there's always a limited amount of ground you can work with or on. So that's the limiting factor. Fossil fuels have broken through that limit and made, let's say, vast lands of waving fields of corn and maize and whatever or other crop possible without any human involvement, or basically next to zero human involvement per ton of produce. We're not talking about that society. In a society like that, where you have like fossil fuel and you have machines and you have all kinds of productivity systems, and gold and silver simply doesn't have a real role. Why? Well, because it ends up with the fuel suppliers. So it will be used to buy fuel, and it will be the preferred currency to buy fuel with. That's why you don't want it to be a currency, because you will see it go to where the fuel comes from for the machines. So that's just, let's say, to set the stage, and it sucks because I think I have to stop this video after 5 minutes. So the question is what happened. So what's then the use of gold and silver? Well, there's a use in a transition period, I think. So because it is a persistent currency. It is a currency that cannot be, let's say, conjured up. It is an international currency. You can go to Burma and you can buy stuff for gold and silver. So a possible scenario for somebody that wants to secure its future is to have a little bit of gold and silver in the US to get out of the US, and then have a lot of it somewhere else where you can live without being bothered by anyone. Because the currency crisis will be a fuel crisis, fundamentally, that means that logistics and mobility will be very small and very, very low. So fleeing the country, I think, in the event of a full-scale currency collapse, calamity with a little, let's say, a panic factor and bank runs and stuff like that, you won't get away. You have to go now. You have to move out of the country now. And if you go to a country like Guatemala or some kind of South American or that's as green as can be. There's so much food there. You really can't, I think, run into problems there. And once the crisis really erupts, people won't be coming because there won't be any mobility. That's what I think. To answer the question, what you do then as a currency in a situation with a currency crisis is you create local currencies. And I've worked on that. I've built a website called TubeCoin where you can have local economies with barter currency. And it's funny because I had a discussion today with somebody that is working for Desertec or promoting it, lobbying for it. And he pointed me to a paper by a German guy. And I very quickly to kind of see if I can find it. It's always a little bit hard to hear. It's a German economist that worked on a theory, and I'm afraid I cannot find it this quickly, so I have to make a separate video about it. It's interesting. What he says is that you have to look at the euro in two ways: a quantitative way and a more or less qualitative way. And you have to separate the two and then allow countries to have a euro with less intrinsic value, with less quantitative value. It's a very nice thing to talk about it that way. It's like wiggling yourself out of the euro without wiggling yourself out of the euro. What he's talking about is a very fundamental thing that I'm talking about here also, is that you have currency that represents fuel, which has to be, liquidity has to be managed relative to fuel. You have currency that is linked to labor, which the liquidity of has to be managed related to labor availability. And that's the fundamental problem in Europe, that you have countries which are more labor intensive and you have countries that are more fuel intensive. In a crisis, to answer the question of Mr. Sharon Family Connect, I think you should simply make your own currency, and you have renewable energies to replace the fossil fuel energy, and you have to do a lot with manual labor and skills. That's why I'm saying that you should develop those, and that you should have renewable power. You won't have the fossil fuel energy, simply won't have it. But you need a means of exchange. Well, I now have a website, TubeCoin, for bartering, where you can have codes to exchange, where you can make QR codes to exchange. Anything can be a means of exchange as long as it's unique and hard to replace. And it doesn't have to persist. If you can reprint it, if you can recreate it, then it doesn't have to persist. But you're talking about an organized situation then. And that's why I'm also talking about local government. Local, you can organize it with your neighbors and your families and your street and your city. You can organize it. If it's going to be, let's say, pillaging groups driving through your village and trying to get what they need without working for it, then you're better off with gold and silver and run for your life. But in a controlled situation, you can create any type of currency you want. And I think that QR codes will be a very useful tool, because they can be unique, they can be private because you own it, nobody else owns the code. It's a paper thing, it's a physical thing. You can scan it with your mobile phone, so you can manage it centrally and change ownership. And it's also what I'm working on, apart from the solar trackers and all the other stuff. That's why I'm asking for support. I'm trying to do a lot. But I'm very helpful. I'm very thankful for the interest, and I'm getting some more serious interest in these solar trackers because they are quite cool. Even though I cannot show you a working model right now, all the parts are there, and when I have time again, I think someday I'll be spending a whole day working on them again. And then you'll see that it's really a cool device, and it's a device that can be used in many places, in many applications. That's why it's important to have it available to the general public and not only to the industry, what I'm today once again being drilled to accept as a premise, is that leave it to the industry. It will all be